You know, I really hate that I have to make one of these tacky complaint videos, but I've officially had enough. Though I do need to explain some backstory first. Because, you see, this all started around 5 months ago. Yes, that is how patient I've been so far trying to go through the normal channels. What happened was on February 1st, my Asus motherboard got bricked after a BIOS update. Was not even sure that was possible, but that's beyond the point. But you might be surprised that despite all the negative press about Asus's repair policies lately, they are not actually the bad guys in this situation, in my opinion. You'll see why. I'm not going to bore you of the details of the problem, but basically some secondary RGB chip, I guess, got corrupted on the board or something, and the computer would just boot loop every minute or so and just keep saying BIOS is updating LED firmware. And even though the motherboard and Asus Z690 Maximus Extreme has a dual BIOS chip, it didn't help. It just said the same thing, which leads me to believe that it's a problem with a separate chip for the RGB lighting, I'm guessing. Anyway, I tried absolutely everything to fix it. I'll just put it all on the screen, or you can take my word for it. But for example, I even went to the length of replacing the CPU with my older 12900K, buying a new kit of RAM, maybe with bad RAM, disconnecting literally every single device inside, and using the motherboard's features like slow mode, everything I could think of. And apparently, this is a problem that other people have had as well, and while some people were able to solve it by just letting it go overnight, it seems that there was a small subset of people, myself included, that apparently have a more severe version of this issue where it doesn't just get stuck loading, but actually boot loops. So letting it sit doesn't fix it or help anything because it keeps restarting. So yes, I did try letting it go overnight anyway, didn't help. So at that point, I rage posted on Twitter and admittedly got a little hot-headed tweeting at Asus, but in my head, I was angry specifically because I knew this was going to be like an RMA replacement that was probably going to take at least a week typically, and I need my computer to edit. Anyway, someone from Asus did reach out and said that they could probably send me a replacement from some special reserve stockpile quicker, but since I had videos to work on and I couldn't wait even a few days, I decided to just go to the local Best Buy and buy a cheaper temporary motherboard the same day and then go through the normal RMA process with no rush. So that's what I did. But that is where the real problems start and where I can finally introduce the retailer called MemoryC. You see, back in early 2022 when I was building the computer, there was somewhat of a shortage of computer parts. And when I went to choose a motherboard, I decided on the top-end Asus board, the Z690 Maximus Extreme, because it had a lot of features that I know I'd use. However, it was sold out everywhere I normally look, except for like scalpers on eBay, and I refuse to buy from scalpers in general. But I was able to find one for sale on Walmart.com of all places through a third-party seller called MemoryC, which I'd never heard of before, but I looked them up and they were a legitimate retailer and apparently are based out of Ireland, which will become relevant. And even though I knew that the price of the motherboard was marked up by about $150 above the MSRP, totaling nearly $1,250 before taxes, I figured, well, I'd rather pay extra and buy from someone legit. In hindsight, though, I probably would have been better off with a scalper. Because it turns out that there was something different about this motherboard that they failed to mention in the listing when I bought it, which I discovered when I tried to enter the serial number of the board into the Asus RMA website, and it gave me an error saying that Asus US couldn't support products purchased outside the US, which was weird because I did buy it within the US. And even though MemoryC is headquartered in Ireland, they had a US address listed on their profile on Walmart.com, and the package even shipped from a US address. And their website even has a US flag on their logo, for God's sake. So after a bit of emailing with Asus support and asking for clarification, turns out that the motherboard that MemoryC sold me actually had a German serial number. Yeah, apparently they sold me a gray market motherboard. And of course, I would not have bought it if I had known this. And this meant that I couldn't get it serviced in the US unless I wanted to pay out of pocket, which I was not about to do because the thing was well within the warranty period. I even tried going to the Asus German RMA website, and while it would accept the serial number, I couldn't actually go through the process to request an RMA because it required a German address. So at this point, I was like, okay, I guess I'll reach out to this MemoryC company and try to get it repaired through them. Thinking worst case, I send it to them and they submit it to Asus themselves for the repair and then give it back to me afterwards. And to their credit, they got back to me quickly the same day and said, sure, I could send the motherboard back to them for repair or replacement, so I did. I shipped the motherboard out and they received it on February 23rd in their North Carolina warehouse. Then a month goes by without hearing anything. So I emailed asking for an update, and they said, our supplier informed us that there is a backlog due to the high column of RMAs. We ask to please give it 1 to 2 weeks, and we will keep you updated. Also, it turns out that the US address they told me to send it to is actually a forwarding address, and it would have been about 1 to 2 weeks faster if I had just shipped it directly to their Ireland address, which, would have been nice if they had told me that, but whatever. So I figure, okay, fine. And then another month goes by. And again, they reply right away at least. But this time saying we will be contacting our supplier on this now and be on the lookout for an update shortly. Another month goes by. It is now May 21st, and I email asking for another update. They reply after just a couple hours, and this time they actually have good news, saying we received an equivalent replacement motherboard today from the vendor and that they've already shipped it out, which in hindsight is a bit sus. I mean, it's been this long and I just happened to email the same day they received it, but I'll come back to that though. Anyway, I was thinking, great, finally. I wasn't really sure what they meant by equivalent replacement, but I figured they meant a refurbished board or something, whatever, fine. So after it arrives, I open up the box and it's not the same motherboard. The so-called equivalent replacement they sent me is a Maximus Z690 Hero. Not a bad motherboard, but nowhere near being an equivalent to what I had. There's a $500 difference in MSRP, not even including the markup I paid to MemoryC for mine, and it's missing several features that I actually use. So I emailed them back immediately after receiving the package explaining all this, and even specifying several of the features that this equivalent board lacks, and were actually reasons I paid the premium for this original one in the first place. Now, here's the thing. I have a partial theory on why they did this. You see, the motherboard that I had is no longer in production. Even the next generation Z790 Maximus Extreme, which I would have considered an equivalent, was only a limited run and also not in production. And to play devil's advocate, I think I have an idea of what MemoryC might say in response to this. Something like, well, it's the best model that we could even get our hands on, which I wouldn't doubt, to be honest. But here's my point. The motherboard is still under the original manufacturer's warranty. Putting the serial number into the Asus Germany site at least tells me that much. It's still covered up till January 2025. So what is going on? Anyway, I waited over a week since that email, which I had sent on May 25th, still no response. So I decided to give them another chance to explain. And on June 4th, I sent another follow-up with more questions, like asking if it's under warranty, why couldn't they just get a replacement from Asus directly instead of going through this mysterious vendor they mentioned. At one point, I was able to even look up on another page on Asus's website, look up the serial number, and it did show me the name of some other distributor based in Great Britain called VIP Computer Central, so there probably is this other vendor. If this is them, I'm not sure. So I don't think they're lying about that, but it's all just very confusing. Also strange, on the German RMA site, if I put in the serial number now, it tells me that the board has already been submitted for repair. And I didn't do this. Was it the vendor? Where is it then? And for all I know, maybe it is some other vendor who screwed everything up. Maybe there is an understandable explanation. But I can't know that because they, again, didn't respond now after 10 days after the second email. And for comparison, before this, the longest they ever took to respond to any of my questions was under 2 hours. Therefore, I think it's safe to say that they're ignoring me. So at this point, I legitimately believe that I've exhausted all the usual options, and I have no other choice but to activate my metaphorical trap card. Surprise, I'm actually a tech YouTuber, which I did not mention before this because I really hate pulling the YouTuber card, except as a last resort, which would be now. Now, like I touched on, I have a personal theory on what might be going on. First of all, I do try to assume the best intentions for people, and based on the timeline of events, and since they were very quick to respond every time up until the end, I would bet that they probably did send the board to some vendor/distributor that they got the board from initially, and the vendor is who screwed up, possibly losing the board or something, I don't know. But I do find it suspicious that after 4 months, they then just happened to get the equivalent replacement board from their vendor the same day I asked them about it. To me, I'm kind of thinking and wondering if maybe what happened was, and again, this is total speculation, maybe they got my email and decided that instead of waiting on the vendor to just ship me the best that they had and hope that after waiting this long that I would just accept the other board, not realizing that I already spent over $400 on a temporary replacement and was way more than willing to just wait it out. Again, though, that's just a hypothesis and opinion, all right? An opinion I don't actually know because they ghosted me. So what now? Look, I just want to be made whole because, again, let me emphasize, this motherboard is still under the original manufacturer's warranty. There is no reason to send me an inferior board, let alone one without explanation. Like I said, I would have gone through Asus support directly if I could, and I tried, but I couldn't because they sold the board out of region, which I'm not even sure about the laws around that, to be honest. And I'm not even asking for a refund here. For all I care, they could go on eBay and buy a used one at around the same cost to the board that they sent me anyway, and then refurbish it, make sure it works, and then send me that. I don't care. I mean, at least that way I would have a US warranty still. But really, all they had to do was not ignore me. I don't know what happens next. If they send me a replacement with the same model, however they get it, I'll be happy. And of course, I'll send them back the one that they did send me. I haven't even used it. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see, and I'll keep you all posted. I would be very curious to know what you guys think about this. Have you had any experience with this company or other bad experiences in general? How did you solve it? In any case, be sure to subscribe. I'll try to post an update when I can. And again, I'd be fine sharing their side of the story if, they give me one. Also, be sure to give it a big giant thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to keep watching, the next video I'd recommend is where I talked about some cool command line tools that I think you guys will find pretty useful. I'll put that link right there and click on. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.